about fashion in the Renaissance era. This era took place between the 14th and 17th centuries. It was known as a rebirth following the Middle Ages. In this period, there were certain laws that regulated who wore what. Clothing depended on the class system, certain styles and materials could only be afforded by the wealthy, and the lower class wore fabrics less worthy. The basic styles from this era for women were gowns with tight bodices and full skirts down the ankles. Lower class ladies avoid using the corset or not at all. And for men's outfits, they would wear a shirt similar to today's dress shirt, but lacking the collar and cuffs we are familiar with. Instead, sometimes utilizing lace collars and cuffs. Men of the working class, like their female counterparts, dressed for utility and might simply wear the shirt alone.
The start of the Victorian era began with Queen's Victoria reign from 1837 to 1901. This era still showed an immense amount of class and wealth when it came to fashion. The fashion for women in the Victorian era started with large dresses, but by 1883, the silhouette changed with a bustle dress. Also, the corset was still used in this era. When it comes to accessories, bonnets and hats were very popular and were worn inside and outside. Men started wearing longer trousers than their short knee-high trousers. Men wore these trousers for day and evening dress. The famous top hat was developed during this time. Men kept it simple during this time, wearing a low coat, a waistcoat, which can be confused with a vest, straight trousers, and high-collared shirt.
Art Deco era. Fashion did a full 180 in the 1920s with the development of flapper girls, dresses with shorter hems, drastically shorter hair, and the influence of Art Deco style. This is when exoticism emerged and art styles like Cubism and Futurism influenced fashion. The liberalism of women in the 1920s was part of the evolution of the Art Deco style. This was a time for experimentation and new designs. Art Deco style was about geometric shapes, based cut dresses, dramatic accessories, pops of color, and, of course, a ton of gold and silver. They were in the 1920s consisted of flat and straight dresses, which gave designers more space for artistic designs like embroideries, appliques, and geometric prints. Pattern prints became the go-to for the avant-garde style. It was all about nightlife in the 1920s, so in the evening, the extravagance came out. Women wore dresses that reflected the Charleston and jazz dancing. They wore short gowns made with silks and velvet and embroidered with sequins, pearls, and metallic threads. There was also a touch of feathers, boas, and layers of fringes to accentuate movement. It was also dreamy. Artists, poets, writers, and designers influenced a new way of life in the 1920s, and fashion reflects this evolution.
Now, the Romantic era came between the 1820s and the 1840s. It was in part inspired by the neo-Gothic influence in history of fashion. During the Romantic era, the waistline slowly descends back to its normal position. Skirts of the 1820s were typically gored or cut in an A shape, and bodices were typically attached directly to the skirts via a waistband with matching belts with decorative buckles were common accessories. Also, during this period, cotton was still the preferential dress fabric, with advancements in textile coloration bringing colors like yellow, orange, brown, and variety of blues. Also, dresses with ornamentation were a hallmark of the 1820s, especially at the hemlines and sleeves. Sleeve styles were both long and short. Romantic era dresses typically were not trained and ended just at the ankles.
Spanish Gilded era. The period known in American history as the Gilded Age spanned the last 3 decades of the 19th century, roughly 1870 and 19,000. Generally, during the Gilded Age, men and women wore many layers of clothing. Men's styles were predominantly different variations of suits, and women's styles were floor-long dresses. Examples in this era were very formal by today's standards. Women wore restrictive corsets to achieve desired silhouettes. Furthermore, both men and women were expected to change clothing as many times per day as their social status and wealth would allow. It was common for wealthy to have different clothing for morning, afternoon, and evening. Just as in any period in history, fashion during the Gilded Age was dynamic. The styles that were chic in 1870 became paste by the turn of the 20th century.